Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Gray Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Gray Minds Think Alike, where we explore the gray areas of healing, power, and truth. Today's guest is Courtney Gilmartin, a protective mother of two whose mission was forged through nearly a decade of post-separation abuse and high-conflict custody battles. As the founder of Monarch Consulting Group and the New Jersey Protective Moms, Courtney brings a powerful blend of lived experience, strategy, and trauma-informed coaching. She's dedicated to helping protective parents feel educated, empowered, and effective in navigating the often overwhelming family court system. Courtney's voice is one of fierce advocacy, clarity, and hope, and we're honored to have her here today. So thank you, Courtney, for coming and sharing and talking with our listener. If you can just tell us a little bit about your personal journey, your background, and how you got to family court advocacy.
I think I sit in a seat where probably a lot of other protective parents can relate to, where you enter into this family court system thinking, all right, it may be a little bit messy. They may dredge up some skeletons in your closet or try to mudsling a little bit, but they don't ever have the foresight or understanding of what can really become your life when you're ensnared in a really contentious family court battle. I guess after about 9 years of marriage, 2 kids later, I found myself in a position where I knew that I needed to get divorced. I didn't know at the time that my ex-husband was definitely abusive, not because he wasn't ever physical in the, universally accepted sense. Now looking back, obviously there was a ton of red flags. I just didn't see it. So we got into family court, and right from the jump, things were very contentious, but my lawyers and everybody just kept, they diminish it. They make excuses. They keep telling you, in 6 months, it's going to get better. In a year, it'll get better. Oh, when he finds a girlfriend, it'll get better. When the kids are older, it'll get better. Yeah. And then years go by and all those milestones pass and it's not better, it's worse. And you're just sitting there thinking, what the heck? How has this become my life? All that aside, I will say our actual divorce litigation was not that long. It was 13 months. I had a business background. I owned my own business for a decade that I ended up selling during the divorce, but I knew enough to know that the longer the divorce litigation dragged on, the more, both of our bottom lines were being destroyed and just all of our money was pouring into our attorneys' pockets. I tried to just get out as unscathed as possible. And yes, that meant leaving a lot on the table and primarily custody. I didn't think that he should have the custody that he wanted, but needless to say, that's something that I had to settle on in order to get that litigation to close. But once the divorce ended, interaction was problematic. Parenting time exchanges were problematic.
Did he have 50%?
So we had the 60-40 split. It was very close. He had a long block of time at the time, 5 days, and the kids were young. They were about 7 and 5. So that was a long period of time to be away from them. And it wasn't even so much just that they were away from me for that period of time, because I know a lot of moms will come to me and really struggle with that. It was that during those 5 days, he was just inundating them with, this is mom's fault. Mom ruined our family. Mom's XYZ. Whatever poison he could feed them, he was really just dumping on them for those 5 days. And then there was no contact. I couldn't speak with them. I wasn't allowed to FaceTime or talk to them. So it was a lot of just trying to fracture that bond that we had every time that the kids spent time with him.
Was it in your agreement that you were allowed to talk to them so he was basically in contempt?
Yeah. And a lot of moms, again, a lot of people will come to me and be like, how is that possible? It's in your divorce agreement. And I always say, there's no divorce police. The police aren't going to get involved in this agreement, which is basically what your divorce agreement is. And it's also even one step further, it's a giant consent agreement. Both in the eyes of the court, you're both agreeing that you're going to do this. It doesn't mean people are going to. And in order to enforce that, you have to put out a lot of money. You got to go back to court. You have to file a motion. And that takes a tremendous amount of emotional fortitude fortitude and the finances to be able to do that. So that's where I think radical acceptance comes in. And when I say radical acceptance, I know that can be triggering to some people. And I don't mean that you have to accept that this is okay. I had to accept that was who I was dealing with.
And you just thought it was just him being difficult.
I knew that it wasn't right, but I don't think at the time I knew the extent of how bad the damage was that he was doing.
Would the kids come back and tell you what daddy said?
In the beginning, they would a little bit, but they were so young. As time went on, obviously they became more and more vocal. And that's when it became really hard, because when I really knew what was happening, it was consistently happening over and over. Because again, we had a PC involved at the time. Obviously, I still had my attorney. So I would be talking to them and giving them updates. Again, they would just be like, when the kids are older, give them a year, it'll settle down. Never settled down. So once I really knew that this was the person I was dealing with and he was just dead set on destroying my relationship with the kids, I had a really hard time sending the kids, because you're essentially sending your kids to be abused and to the wolves. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so what happened from there? And how long ago was that?
So we got divorced in 2017. We separated, obviously, 2016. So we're going on a decade here of court involvement. So we had a PC, like I said, right from the jump, just because the divorce was so contentious. There was a lot of motion practice in that 13 months, believe it or not. And then just every holiday was a disaster. That's really where things would really flare up. Any variance from the schedule that we had was a huge debacle. And a debacle, like the PC was involved.
I have the same. Yeah.
The police were involved. The lawyers were involved. It was just insanity.
And why do you think that is? What was the end goal that he wanted?
I think for a lot of people who are disordered or abusive, it's just the control. And any open door that they see, any change in the schedule where they can cause problems or try to dominate and really dictate how this is going to go, they're going to try to take that opportunity. And I think there's also an element of he was going to just try to wear me down, where Christmas would come around and I would be like, just take them. Emotionally and mentally couldn't handle the battle.
So it was just about power. It wasn't that he...
Always. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And did he have any disorders or mental health issues that you were aware of?
At the time, listen, I think I racked my brain for far too many hours thinking, what is wrong with him? How can we fix him? How can we make this better? I think at the end of the day, a lot of abusive individuals don't have underlying mental health conditions. They are just abusive. They thrive on chaos. They want that power and control.
Well, that's the narcissism aspect. And that's I would say most people that engage in coercive control have a narcissistic disorder, personality disorder. So
I think it's Dr. Ramani or one of them. I don't want to misspeak, but one of them says every coercive controller, abusive person is probably narcissistic. Every narcissist is not a coercive controlling.
She actually said that on my podcast. Yeah, she was on 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So is he? I don't know. That's for a mental health professional, but to be able to over and over repeatedly cause so much chaos in your children's lives, I would think that you would have to have a pretty serious disorder. And then things just continue to get worse. Like anything that should be easily handled through co-parenting communication was not. Passports were an issue. My sister's wedding was an issue. Everything was an issue.
How did you deal with that? You just gave?
No, not all the time. When I tried to be strategic, right? Like when I knew I needed to give in, I had to pick my battles. And that's part of a strategy, right? So I would pick my battles, and other times I wouldn't pick my battles and I would push back and I would really try to push through. And like, for example, my sister's wedding, he was dead set on not letting my kids go. It was planned on his weekend. Of course, like my sister is not going to plan her wedding around the parenting time schedule. It's absurd.
Sure.
So that I really had to push, and I had to get the court involved in order for them to say, no, the kids are going to this. But there's a strategy in that too, because when you have documentation like that over years of their just inability to co-parent, eventually the court and someone involved is probably going to look and be like, listen, something has to change. This person needs sole custody or sole legal decision-making, something. It just doesn't happen quick enough. And I think a lot of people just give out in that, like that gray area, that interim period of getting divorced, this clock start ticking to when something can really actually change. I tell a lot of people during active divorce litigation, you're probably not going to have much luck getting that sole decision-making unless something catastrophic happens, because they're going to look at both of you you and just be like, you guys just have to get along.
And what did the court say when you said he won't let me take our children to my sister's wedding? Did they see that as being an issue?
By that time, everybody that was involved knew he was an issue. So it was pretty much, no, the kids are going.
Okay. So they went.
Yes. The problem becomes when something, like I was supposed to leave on a Friday for the wedding and he has them that Thursday, those type of scenarios were always an issue. And then I was always stressed. Am I going to get them? Is he going to let them out? Is he going to give them back to me? And that type of stress and worry just wears people down. It's not fair. And that is abusive in itself, because
I cried every day over things like that, which tainted the short time that I did have with Greyson and my experience with motherhood because of things just like that, where they don't see reason.
Right. And that, I think, is a hard pill to swallow for me now, looking back. Just all the joy, all the small things he's taken, all the adversity that we had to trudge through. It was like trudging through sludge but not like my sister's wedding. Like, why does it have to have this cloud?
Why is everything so difficult? Yeah. No, I get it. And there's the $1 million question. Nobody has the answer.
And I go to my therapist still once a week, and I have obviously grown and healed a lot of parts of me. But I say to her, like, there are things that I don't know that I'll ever get over. How do you ever get over that stuff? I don't think we have to, but I don't want to be like rough around the edges forever because of it.
And bitter. Right. I don't. And how old are your kids now?
So my daughter's 15 and my son is 13.
And do they have a good relationship with their dad?
No. So I would say things got progressively worse. And then when my daughter was probably sixth grade, the years start blurring together. During COVID, ironically, he was very quiet. I think part of his needing to control every aspect of his life took a back burner. Yeah, to COVID, because no one was in control. That was such an unprecedented time. I think even he was having a hard time probably dealing with that. So things were actually quiet during COVID. The kids were home from school. I don't think he wanted to have to deal with the homeschooling stuff. I was working and I was managing all of that. They went back and forth. It wasn't a great time. And then as the world started to open up is when his spiderweb of control started to weave it again. Like, the kids weren't allowed to go here, and he didn't want them in group settings, and he didn't want them at restaurants, and he didn't want them here. And it was just the constant harassment and criticism and demeaning, degrading messages about my parenting and what I was doing with the kids. And we traveled shortly after the travel restrictions were lifted. And that was, the end of the world to him. And there was a lot of him trying to weaponize the third parties that were involved. They'd write disparaging emails to teachers or school administrators or our lawyers at the PC. Courtney's a terrible mother. She's the worst person in the world. She doesn't care about our kids. Look at how awful she is. She took the kids to Florida and she's just a piece of crap, and I should have the kids forever. And that's putting it mildly, because I don't want to curse, but there was a lot of that. So as the world started to open up, it just continued to escalate. And we got to a point where it was like we were in crisis. Basically, my daughter did not want to go. She was like, Dad just screams at us. He yells at us. All he does is talk about you and the divorce. And at this point, it had been years. They were sick of hearing about it. Her social life and her independence was starting to become more important to her. And that just did not bode well with him. So the control he was trying to exert over me and my life after we split, he was putting on her, and she just was trying to be a normal kid and was not understanding it. And I, again, made peace with myself, and I was like, I cannot protect him anymore. I'm not going to shield her and be like, Dad just loves you and he's overprotective and he's worried about you. And when she was coming home saying to me like, Dad, let me hang out with XYZ because you're friends with their parents, I was just like, that's not okay. That is not okay. And I really drew the line in the sand. And I said to everybody involved, I was like, I'm not gaslighting my kids anymore. I'm not telling them that this is okay. I've eaten so much. I've shielded them from so much. I've taken on so much that I just will not continue doing this anymore. And she was really resistant to go. She did not want to go. I was trying to talk to him. Obviously, I knew that wasn't going to work, but I was trying to be cognizant of the fact that I was going to probably end up back in court in front of a judge. So I was trying to reason with him in an email, like, she doesn't want to go. It's not fair what you're doing to her. Stop talking about the divorce. Like, we need to work on this. Just landed on deaf ears, obviously. Needless to say, he took me to court. She was not going. She did not want to go. And so he filed a motion, took me to court, and wanted all this compensatory makeup time. And the judge denied it, but wanted us to go for the custody eval and wanted us to start co-parenting therapy. And we got a new PC. So they threw the court family kitchen sink at us, as I call it. We had 3 experts. We went from 0 experts because our first PC was no longer working working with us, and we went to 3. And
is a PC, I guess that's a parent coordinator.
yeah.
Is that the same as like a guardian ad litem?
So it's similar in it's supposed to help reduce conflict, but it's not specifically for the kids. It's not going to speak to their best interests and make decisions. The PC is supposed to just help us make decisions.
Okay.
But the first one helped. I will say the first one did help. He ended up being a conflict because my first attorney joined his practice. So that was a little bit of a devastating blow. But at the end of the day, my ex really wasn't really listening. He was keeping the wheels on as best he could, but it was going to fall apart anyway. So the judge ordered the evaluation, and I will say that evaluation definitely changed the trajectory of our case for the better. We had thankfully named the expert we wanted to use in our divorce agreement, which I will say is a tip for anyone listening that thinks they're going to end up in post-settlement litigation for custody. If you know there's a good expert out there, try to get it in your agreement.
Okay.
We knew there was a good expert in New Jersey. She was young at the time, but she was up and coming. She understood coercive control, that non-physical domestic abuse. She really was focused on the best interests of the kids. And
right.
She was a little bit
I don't think anyone knows in advance, though, that this is going to happen. That's the problem.
I think if there's any echo of issues, if you're coming out of an abusive marriage and your kids are young, I would say try to get it in there.
No, that's smart because you just don't know.
You don't know. And if and when you have to go back to court, which I hope no one listening does, but I know that the sad reality is there will be people listening that are going back to court or getting divorced and will be back in court. You want to have that in there because the judge is very likely to just order the expert you agreed to. That's why I said it's a consent agreement. Then pick some random person that could be off
or just for the money. So yes, I agree with all that. Now, for our listeners who are not familiar with what post-separation abuse is and how it shows up in custody cases, can you share a little bit of that about what I'm assuming that's what you endured, and I guess parental alienation, which some people claim that's not a thing. So why don't you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I know that parental alienation is a very hot topic, right? But it essentially is basically an abusive set of abusive behaviors towards kids intended to fracture the relationship with the other parent. So it for sure is that term problematic. Yes, but that's a whole nother segue. Post-separation abuse, right? Withholding funds, always getting reimbursed for activities was an issue. Child support was an issue. All of that's considered financial abuse, right? They're trying to purposefully fracture your ability to pay or interfere with your ability to pay and sustain things and probably get legal representation. The demeaning, degrading, harassing communication, every interaction was problematic.
Right. So it is coercive control, basically go hand in hand, because that's basic everything that I lived through. But the thing is, I was never with Greyson's father, so there was no post-separation.
So it could even be like post-settlement, we could say, like whatever line in the sand when people think, let's say you weren't married, but then you settle on like a custody agreement or something. Once you have a child with someone like this, that child then becomes a conduit for them to have access to you. And if there's access, they're probably going to abuse you in some way, whether it's at exchanges. At exchanges, he would be giving me the finger, mumbling under his breath, standing over me, coming to my car, slamming doors, yelling, screaming, pulling really fast. Yeah. Pulling up really fast next to me in his car. When I would leave the parking lots, he'd trail like right behind me on my tail in the car, intimidate you, try to intimidate you.
Were you ever like frightened for your life or your children's life?
I've had 4 temporary restraining orders. In Jersey, it's super hard to get a permanent one because we have restraining orders for life. So the judges are pretty hesitant to give out the permanent ones. But I've had 4 temporary just because like one time he was going through my car, he was taking pictures. I had a planner at the time. He was taking pictures of all my contacts. Then he started calling all my contacts, threatening all my contacts, tell her she better not divorce me. He would drive by the marital home and honk the horn and pull in the driveway, blow on the horn all night.
All of that too.
Yeah. He'd try to run me over in a parking lot with his car. He'd speed right past me. And if I didn't move, he was definitely going to hit me with his car. And after a little league game, there's 86 text messages in 1 hour. You're a bitch. You're a slut. You're everything under the sun.
I got exactly the same, except the courts didn't help me at all.
Yeah, they would give me the temporary when I would go because it's a little bit lower.
Yeah, I didn't even get that.
And so many people, same thing. So many people will just be denied. And then that
I lied and Greyson was killed the very next day. There was an issue. But I'm sure Florida law is different than New Jersey law. I'm just curious, do family courts mostly want to do 50-50? Or are they a little bit more lenient towards mothers? They are. It's just 50-50 no matter what.
Yeah. It's pretty much the standard now.
Right. We have a 50-50 law here in Florida.
Yeah. That I know that you guys have that law. It's not explicitly 50-50 in New Jersey, but it pretty much is. The way that our custody statute reads, there was a little bit of a change a few years back. I forget which year, but it pretty much reads now equal access, which is basically which is problematic. And I know unless someone moves out of state, and that's really the only scenario that I see where it's less than 50-50. But then you'll have them refine the agreements where in the summer it's month on, month off, or week on, week off. So you're basically pretty much at that 50-50 if you take into account all the extra time that they're getting.
Right.
Yeah.
So where do you stand now? Your kid's a little older. You obviously went back to court and they saw the PC helped you figure things out. What is your agreement now?
So we went back to court and we started the evaluation. My daughter still did not want to go. So my ex took me back to court and asked for the compensatory time again. And the judge ordered it. So then that ended up resulting in him getting my weekends the way that the judge ordered it. So I was only able to see the kids Tuesday and Wednesday night for 6.5 months. And during that time, it was just awful. My daughter was a disaster. The anxiety she had was through the roof.
And they did that because why did they do that? Why did they take your time away?
The judge ordered the kids to go back to the normal schedule the first time. And she was not happy that I was not basically picking my daughter up and throwing her in the car and forcing her to go. And I was like, my daughter is now in 7th grade, I think at the time. How can I? She's basically as tall as I am. She knows what's going on. Her daughter's screaming, her father's screaming at her the whole time she's there. How can I possibly force her to go? She did not care. The second time we were in front of her, she was basically like, I don't care what she says. If you don't force her to go, I'm taking your custody from you forever. So at that point, I had no choice. And the kids were in school. They did not know this was coming. And I will never forget, my ex was like, you know what, Your Honor, we're going to let Courtney go see the kids one last time before this so she can tell the kids what has to go on. And I remember thinking, please do not act like you're doing anyone a favor. I have to go do the dirty work now and tell these kids that they have to spend every weekend, every day with him except Tuesday and Wednesday for the next 6 months. So that went on. It was horrific. And then we started the eval. And I will say the only thing now looking back is that during that time, it gave the evaluator the ability to see what more time with dad would look like for the kids. And more time with dad was not good for the kids.
What did he say happened?
The evaluator. So the evaluation took 13 months and they actually called us in. I had a new attorney at that time. And she was like, in all my years practicing, I've never been called in after an evaluation. Like normally they'll release the report to the parties, either in camera where you have to go to the courthouse and review it, or you have to review it with your attorney. They called us in. We did not know what was in the report. And the judge who had ordered the kids with him for 6.5 months actually did the right thing. She suspended his custody immediately. And I got full custody of the kids right then and there. My daughter, New Jersey's a one-party state. So my daughter had been recording my ex when they were spending time with him. And the recordings were horrific. Just sitting them down for hours at a time, screaming at them about me and the divorce and the litigation. And just
how did she record? On a phone?
She would use her phone and voice notes.
Wow.
He typically would scream and lecture them in the car. So she would always sit in the back.
So she would be in the back.
And because she would try to get away from him anyway, because she would be like a nervous wreck after. And then she would just save the voice memos. And then the evaluator was able to listen to all of those. And so was the judge.
Wow.
They actually recognized what he was doing as emotional abuse. And that's really what kind of tipped the scales there.
Did you know she was doing that? Recording?
I knew she was recording, yeah. Because she was, at this point, we had talked to the family therapist. She had talked to her therapist. We had DCP and P involved a million times.
Did you hear the recordings before?
Some of them, and they were just awful. And then we had to listen to them again in the courtroom. They had to play them into the record. And it's horrific. And he was yelling about me a lot of the time, but then he was also just really demeaning and degrading and awful to the kids. If they messed up in sports, the ride home from the game would just be him just ripping into them, just screaming at them. It just awful. Not an environment conducive to that any child should have to be in. And a lot of this went on when he had the makeup time. So it also gave the evaluator the ability to see the difference in the kids when the schedule went back to normal, and then really explain to the court that if this was truly about the kids, he would not have behaved the way he did during that time. He was awful to me. And his whole stance has always been to the court, if I just get actual 50-50, I'll get over it. And he was just worse. I know, I see the eye roll. It's just ridiculous because I'm like, he has 2 days less than 50-50 a month.
Yeah.
And if he was nice to me and the kids, I would probably let him take more time with the kids.
Right.
But he's awful.
Right.
So why am I going to let him take more time? The court did the right thing. Of course, he was pro se at the time, but he lawyered up immediately. And 3 days later,
did they appeal it?
So it was a temporary order, so they couldn't appeal. And his lawyer, the only good thing I'll ever probably say about his lawyer is that they didn't fight the report.
It's factual.
And you really couldn't. I mean, there was just so much in that report.
Yeah.
So
you're lucky that the recording, they wouldn't accept that here.
I know.
In Florida. You have to have consent, which is crazy.
And that is it's such a hurdle and it's such a barrier for so many people. New York is the same. I think in New York, it's a felony if you record someone without their consent. It's just awful.
Yeah. It defeats the whole purpose, right, of recording because no one's going to willingly act that way on it. So
especially someone like that, because as soon as you pull out a recording, they'd stop.
Yeah. I've had people like have their Ring doorbell take a whole yelling battle conversation and the camera's there. The person that comes in sees the camera at the doorbell. So for me, I feel like that should be consent if you're going to talk right in front of a camera. But nope, they don't allow it.
I know, it's awful. And that always saddens me when someone that I meet is in a two-party consent state. You have to get a little bit more strategic, right? You need to really try to amp up your strategic communication and get as much in writing as you can as that can be used. But it's having to communicate with them is just soul-sucking. So they didn't fight the report, but they acted as though he was going to comply with all the recommendations in order to get his parenting time reinstated. And that happened in December 2022. So we were back in court in January 2023. And I would say for the entirety of 2023, we were in court once a month for status updates, which was just so costly.
So you guys live near each other? Were the kids still able to just, they're not social and everything the same?
But the kids were not seeing him during that time period. We were there for status updates. My son started to go a little bit. They tried to do reunification therapy with my daughter and him, which failed miserably, to say the least. And then it just gets more ridiculous. So we were in court once a month for status updates to see how he was doing. Obviously, there were a ton of problems. And so I was like, okay, I need sole legal custody permanently. Like, we cannot keep in this hamster wheel. This is not fair. My lawyer bills were $7,000, $8,000 a month for all of 2023 because we were in court sometimes twice a month if there were problems. All these
were you able to pay that?
So I did get an order in 2024 that he had to pay some of it. I'll have to go back for more eventually one day.
Yeah, they create the problem. They should pay.
Exactly. And that's something that the court, if anyone listening is in the court system, that is something that is an actual very effective deterrent.
Right.
Unless the person is so moneyed that they don't care.
Right.
A lot of them do care about money. So if you start to put them on the hook for all of this,
they'll think twice.
Probably stop.
Right.
They probably will. But when you just let them have free reign of the court and let them use the court to terrorize and torment their victims, they're never going to stop. So that's a hot take on that. But that's what I always say whenever I talk to anybody that will listen. That's family law attorney, judges, whatever. I'm like, they have to be held accountable. You have to hold them to account for what they've done when one person is driving that conflict, for sure.
You must hear a lot because you started the New Jersey Protective Parent. Can you talk a little bit about that? How that started for you? Obviously, I see why, but how did it actually get started?
I was in a lot of Facebook groups about this stuff, obviously, because you're just searching. You're so desperate. I felt like I was living I felt like I was living in a movie. My friends' lives, everyone's lives around me was like going on like normal. And I'm like, I am living in an alternate universe. I searched, the internet. For groups. I found a few other moms in One Mom's Battle group. They have the state groups. And we started talking. A few of us started talking. And there was some
Shout out to Tina Swinton.
There was coercive control in New Jersey, which we were trying to get it passed. There was like a version of the law that an assembly person had introduced that didn't really go anywhere. So when the next session came up, we were like, we need to get this passed. So we banded together, we formed the nonprofit, more so as to make it official because we didn't want to be seen as angry moms at the courthouse, like bitching about things. And then we put the name out there. We got a ton of people on our our mailing list. So we do have a nice group now at this point where we're trying to work on some other things. I'd love to do fundraising one day to get some resources to help moms get services to heal, like actually heal.
Right.
Primarily, we were focused on the legislative stuff. So we got coercive control passed in 2024. The bar here in New Jersey was dead set against it. They did not want it. They testified against it.
So how did you get it passed? Because it didn't fly here in Florida, even in Greyson's law.
Yeah, it was watered down. I'll just start with that. You cannot get a restraining order here for coercive control. But what it did do is it expanded the definition of domestic abuse to recognize that coercive control is domestic abuse. And we got a list in the law, which is what we wanted. We wanted the list of behaviors in there. And the one thing that we really wanted was if they try to threaten to take custody away, that should be recognized as coercive control. And it's in there. So that was important for us. We've had to give up on the fact that you can't go to the courthouse for coercive control to get a restraining order. It has to be something else. And then the judge has to take into consideration when issuing the final coercive control.
That's similar to Greyson's law. We had to dumb it down from the first time we ran it through.
I think it helped because I think it was Massachusetts had just passed the law. Another state had just passed the law. So there was some like monkey see, monkey do aspect to it. The legislators here were like, oh, now, New Jersey can be like number 5. It's a lot easier when other states to get your state to.
You tried to use Caden's law as federal backing.
So right now we're in the middle of a whole nother debacle because they're actually trying to change the custody statute in Jersey to codify reunification therapy.
Okay.
So we're hoping this is not going to go anywhere because reunification therapy is so damaging and just, it's like the Wild West. And hopefully we can get Caden's law into New Jersey. I know in other states, they've gotten aspects of Caden's law. It's been hard to get all of Caden's law, especially the training piece, because that judiciary branch, man, they just do not want to be told what to do by the legislators. They're like,
sure don't.
You're not going to tell us what we need to do, which is a shame. I think something that is really helpful that we got a lot of victims to come testify during the hearings for coercive control, and that really helped push it through.
We did that for Greyson's law too. People just showed up out of the woodwork.
Yes. And we had a really good sponsor that wanted that law passed. So she helped. Those were the two big pieces. We got lucky and a lot of hard work there and just outreaching and the stars aligned.
Is it helping?
It's starting to help. I'm starting to see some like unpublished things come down. Nothing in the appellate court yet, but I've seen like murmurs of unpublished opinions come through. And there was actually one really great one where the judge said coercive control was a factor in this. The fact that the ex was continuously weaponizing custody litigation is abusive conduct and needs to be recognized as such. So it's coming out here and there. I will say, this is obviously I'm only one person, but others can probably think about their scenario. Ever since it passed, my ex has definitely taken a step back. It could be just timing in our case and the fact that he doesn't really have any anymore. But I think he knows now, obviously, that it has to be considered. And he's been identified as a coercive controller. So it's not like that can be refuted if we were to end up in front of a judge. Like he is one.
Right. Does he still send you those texts and does he still try to attack you?
Yeah. All the time.
So what kind of changes would you most like to see in family court system to protect children and save parents more?
I think from the jump, there needs to be some sort of screening for DV and coercive control.
Okay.
And if there is any sort of flag on the case that is a factor in this family dynamic, they need to be handled in a different way. The standard way is not going to work. For a high conflict or abusive person, family court is like pouring gasoline on that fire. So I think right there, I would love to see some sort of like screening for that. And then we need to really get creative and have some alternate tracks for resolution for families that are trapped in this like that is family court. It just cannot. We can't have survivors and children coming out 10, 12, 15 years in family court, all of their savings diminished.
Yeah, there has to be a better way.
There has to be a better way. And private custody, which is the route I took, DCP&P never helped my family. They don't help a lot of families in Jersey. They're on a ton of scrutiny. That's a whole nother topic, but private custody is just so financially out of reach for so many families. Like the cost needs.
I don't even know what that is. What's private custody?
Like I had a private evaluator. So, she's not through DCP&P. So
you just hired her on your own.
We both hired her. She charges a very expensive rate, but she's very highly qualified. But again, there's not good play. They're not all good players. It's not covered by insurance, obviously, nothing. It's not recognized as anything that can be billed through insurance. So I think our first eval was just over $25,000.
Do you think they actually want to help, or do you think they just do it for the money?
I think some want to help. I think my evaluator is probably a diamond in the rough, but she wants to help within the system that she's in, which sometimes you get in front of these judges and they just they just fly off the handle.
Do you think there's a difference between men and women evaluators? Do women side with moms more and do men side with dads more? Or do you see it fair?
Well, I honestly don't know. I think there's just really bad players in the mix, and I've seen really bad women and I've seen really bad men. I think I'm more disappointed in women because when I hear the stories, and I know a lot of these bad players are moms themselves, I'm like, how could you ever do that to another mom? I think obviously there needs to be much better training for judges. They tout, oh, we're doing this training, we're doing that training. I'm like, okay, but who's training, who's presenting, and what is being presented? Because it's so critically important. They need to understand how abusers weaponize family court, what to really look for. And you can't just keep throwing families into, like I said, the kitchen sink with 3 different people that are going to tell them 3 different things, stories that are all on retainer. That's not manageable either. And I think a lot of the lawyers prey on this emotional aspect that comes into play when you're dealing with someone's kids. Again, I'm not shaming anyone. Like, you should be emotional. They're your children. This is such an emotional thing to go through. When you look at family court, like, the motion practice is out of control. And every answer that I hear people get is file a motion, file a motion. And I'm like, you're almost diminishing the process for the litigant, right?
Right.
I tell people, do not file a motion until you have so much evidence that you are really going to sway that judge. Because the judges hear that they also have a compassion fatigue, which is a real thing. Like, they hear this stuff day in and day out. So you have to be able to stand out in some way. I always tell everyone, document everything, because you need to back up everything that you're going in for. And every red flag, you need a whole list of things, because they're not going to talk to you. Yeah. And whatever you think you need, probably 10 times what you think you need. So that's why now I work mostly with people getting their documentation straight, because people will be like, I have screenshots on my phone and I have this email over here and this, and it's all disjointed. It's not cohesive. They're stumbling around trying to find things. They're ineffective. They're inefficient. The lawyers are getting pissed off because they're like, you don't even have what you said you had. So I help people just manage it like a project. Like, I put my business brain in to my case. Is that what Monarch Consulting Group does? Yeah. Because just tell everyone about Monarch. When I went, I was like, I was pro se at the time just because the cost was crazy. I got my lawyer at the end of that eval. So I was like, how am I going to get her all this evidence that I have in a way where it's going to be impactful? She's going to be able to navigate through it without wasting time and wasting money, because her time is my money. So I created basically a case hub, like a spreadsheet, and I managed it like a project, right? So I put all my proofs, I linked them all directly in there. I built out a timeline. Every incident that I put on my timeline had evidence. If I didn't have evidence for it, I didn't give it to her unless she asked for something, because this is also what I tell people. Once you get enough direct evidence with like proofs to back it up, you can start weaving in indirect evidence and stories or whatever you may not have evidence or proof for, but you will just become much more credible, because they're going to be like, she has 50 proofs for this stuff. So obviously this story happened, right? So I created this system that I call like the Monarch method now, which is just really just honing in on what is the perpetrator doing and what impact is it having on the family, and then what's the proof, and then just being able to quantify it in some way. Like, I will categorize everything. Everything's cohesive. The naming convention is all the same on all the proofs. You can search, you can index things. So I've really built it out as, like I said, like you're managing a project, which is how you have to look at these cases. I had spreadsheets. Yeah. It's just the amount of evidence is overwhelming. And I meet so many women, because most protective parents are women, and I'll probably have people come for me with that, but it's just true. Right. Statistics. Yes. They're just in this state of freeze and overwhelm, because they're like, I don't even want to look at them. They're on my phone. They're here. Oh my gosh, I can't find them. So we start with like baby steps of, let's just get this all in one spot. Let's just put it all in a Google folder. Let's start there. And then depending on how traumatized or how their bandwidth for doing this is how I'll tailor it, because I can tailor my services for whatever they need. I can go through it for them, or they can go through it and then have me just check in on it. It's whatever they need. But baby steps just to get them out of that unfrozen state. And then once you really build your foundation with evidence and proofs, I think you become a lot stronger in your position. You have a much more solid footing, and you can go into court or an appointment with a lawyer or consultation or a meeting with a mediator in a much more strong and confident way.
Confident,
yeah, you'll have the proof. The proof is in the pudding. Like,
do you ever hear about apps like Victim's Voice? Because we had that on a podcast, and it was basically an app used just for collecting the evidence that you need, which can be very helpful for many.
I haven't heard of that one, but I know like a lot of my clients will use like Our Family Wizard or...
That's different. It's different because we use Talking Parents and things like that to, keep, But Victim's Voice is actually just an app where they can keep everything stored for evidence-based purposes that can't be traced. It's very safe. So you might want to look into it.
Yeah, I'll look at that.
And so who should reach out to you?
Any protective parent who's anywhere in your journey. When you are first starting your journey is ideal, obviously, because then you don't have years of backlog that you have to go back and work through. But anyone that is, I don't even know where to start. I have all this evidence. I have all these thoughts in my brain, but nothing seems to make sense. Nothing's making an impact.
Can it be in any state or just Jersey?
Yeah. I've also worked with clients in England and New Zealand recently. Okay. I just worked with someone in Australia too. So any state, any country. And like I said, I custom tailor it. I work within budgets. I get that this is costly, but I try to keep the cost of working with me and getting started super low, super affordable. And then it's up to the client to really give them the tools, and then they have to see how to see how to use it.
Gotcha. Okay. What message do you have for a mother listening right now who may feel lost in the system or scared or unheard? Any last words of wisdom?
Yeah. So I would say you know your truth. And that's also why I said getting your evidence organized helps you really sit strong in that truth, and try not to beat yourself up because there is no like right way to do this, right? You're navigating uncharted territory. So keep doing what you're doing. Try to be the best parent that you can be given the circumstances. If you have to take a break from litigation, take a break. I wasn't in active litigation the entire time. There were years, months, days where I was like, I'm not doing this. And that's fine too. Your kids will eventually see the truth. They will. I know sometimes people feel hopeless. I would say in that like most impressionable state is probably the hardest, when they're like 5 to 11. And then I think once you get past that, the blinders come off and they become like disillusioned with the cosplay dad, the nice dad, if you will, and they start to see the truth. So just keep going one day at a time. That's all you can do.
Yeah. And trust your gut.
Yes. I always say, that's why I say, your truth.
Right.
Like that intuition, that truth, you know it. Whatever you need to get through the days, get through the days. Like I said, there's no manual for this. I did not think I'd be here.
I wish there was.
10 years later. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I'm going to put all of your contact info in our show notes so our listeners can find you for both Protective Parents and Monarch. And I thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that. I wish you all the best. I'm glad that, your kids are now a little bit older and they can make up their own minds. Keep doing what you're doing, keep fighting and helping all of those other parents that need help. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Take care, Courtney. And I'll make sure to reach out if our listeners have any questions.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. If there's someone that you want to hear from on this podcast, please feel free to send me an email. Or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out at Allie@Greyson'sChoice.org. If you would like to continue to hear our podcast, please consider donating at Greyson'sChoice.org. Any amount helps to fund our mission to help protect our children.